getting into it with a fan who she was going back and forth with in the front row and pointing it out to the officials. And now the officials calling on security to take a look. Shot clock violation. And now Bonner and Clark get into it. Oh, yeah.
And so here we go again. Welcome back to the Dark Times channel. So Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever are now eliminated for the WNBA playoffs. And y'all's girl CC, she was on one last night. She pulled a full Karen and got somebody kicked out of the game.
Getting into it with a fan who she was going back and forth with in the front row and pointing it out to the officials. And now the officials calling on security to take a look.
The individual that we see in the video was kicked out for hateful and derogatory speech. Now people are saying, at least online, because I was wondering why he was kicked out. I was wondering what he could have possibly said to get kicked out of the game or to get Caitlin Clark's attention the way that he did, and not necessarily everybody else's attention around him, because it didn't seem like there was any kind of outcry, because there's a lot of family, women and children at the game. And so you would have thought that other people would have been pointing at this guy if he said something that was really out of line. But from what people are saying online that he said something to this effect. And that's unfortunate. Nobody deserves to be at their profession, whatever job they work at, and be called names like that or have accusations hurled at them. Nobody deserves that. And so that's unfortunate. And you can tell by her teammates' response that, it was something that was out of line like that. Maybe something that she heard before and then she got fed up with it, because there's been a lot of nasty rumors going around out there. And so, it's unfortunate that a lot of these WNBA women, a lot of these strong women, have to put up with the rumors like that. And so it's a good thing that, it was handled and he was kicked out of the game. But aside from that, there was a lot of little moments during the game in which things got testy, and that's to be expected. It was a playoff atmosphere. Game 2, winner you go home, or at least for the Indiana Fever. And so that was the kind of environment and intensity that you would expect. And it reminded me a little bit of the old school NBA, in which you had some players back in the day that genuinely didn't like each other. They didn't hang together. They literally wanted to beat the you-know-what out of each other. And so it made for good TV, and I was all for it. I was watching it. I had my popcorn and everything. And sure enough, things popped off.
Shot clock violation. And now Bonner and Clark get into it. Oh, yeah.
And a lot of people out there, WNBA fans in particular, they like to lie to themselves. They like to lie to themselves and pretend like they don't enjoy what they're watching, what they're witnessing. When it comes to Caitlin Clark, when it comes to Angel Reese, and when it comes to some of these other WNBA players in the league. Because this friction that we're seeing, Caitlin Clark's fans would call it animosity. But whatever you want to call it, it's good for the game. It's good for business. And the commissioner of the WNBA, to her credit, she actually said the quiet part out loud. She actually said something that she's probably not supposed to say. But what everybody in the business world knows, what everybody in the entertainment industry knows, is that it's good for business.
There's no more apathy. Everybody cares. It is a little that Bird Magic moment, if you recall, from 1979 when those two rookies came in from a big college rivalry, one white, one black. And so we have that moment with these two. But the one thing I know about sports, you need rivalry. That's what makes people watch. They want to watch games of consequence between rivals. They don't want everybody being nice to one another. So the social media is different today than it was in 1979 when it didn't exist. But, I always tell the players, I was told a long time ago, if someone's typing something in, you wouldn't ask their advice, ignore it. So it's a balance, but certainly from a marketing dollars, but corporate partners are stepping up to endorse these players much more so than they were 5 years ago, because they see the benefit of having women and diverse women representing their brand.
I agree, rivalry.
And so good for her. I'm glad she said the quiet part out loud, something that she probably wasn't supposed to say, because she got crucified for it the next day. All the different networks were talking about how wrong she was for saying it, talking about what she should have said, and she worded it wrong. No, she didn't mince her words. She knew exactly what she was saying, and there was truth to what she was saying. And this is one of the exact reasons why the NBA is in the condition that it's in right now, or at least why it's not like it was in the 90s or in the 80s and the 70s, when there was actual rivalries, when players and teams actually didn't like each other. Fans didn't like each other. And it was good for the game, and it was good for business. But then, as we all know, directly after the Malice in the Palace, everything changed.
This guy runs into the stands to swing at a fan. A guy half his size. Now Steven Jackson's up there swinging at people.
And subsequently, the NBA, David Stern in particular, had to clean up the NBA, and we didn't see any more fights. Because if anybody fought, there's going to be a lot of money. And I'm not trying to say that violence is good or violence is the answer to ticket sales. I'm not trying to say that. But in the NBA in particular, it was the threat of violence that added to the thrill. The fact that at any given time, you could watch some of the largest human beings, some of the most athletic human beings go at it. And so whether or not people want to admit it, that added to the level of excitement. And of course, that wasn't the only reason for some of the decline we see in the NBA as it is today. It's not the only reason. I think the way players come up and the way players are brought up has a lot to do with it as well. A lot of players grow up playing with one another. And so a lot of players are very familiar with one another once they come into the NBA. And so subsequently, we don't have that same level of friction there as days past when players didn't know each other. They didn't know anything about each other. They didn't hang together. They weren't boys. But even with all that, the lack of rivalries, the NBA not being physical anymore, even with all that, the NBA is still the best basketball show in town. No doubt about it. It's still the #1 basketball league in the world. And because of that, it's extremely profitable, which is why we see the inflated salaries that we do in the NBA. But the NBA can get away with it. The NBA can get away with it for this reason, because the NBA, we're talking about some of the most skilled players in the entire world, some of the most athletic players, some of the most athletic individuals in the entire world. And we can't say the same for the WNBA. And I'm not trying to be sexist here. I'm not trying to start nothing here, but reality is reality. When it comes to women's sports, the WNBA game, it's a different product. Everything I said about the men's league, everything I said about the NBA, as far as the skill, the athleticism, as far as being the best in the world, it's the same thing for the WNBA, except you got to put an asterisk by it. You got to put for a woman. Great athleticism for a woman. Great skill for a woman. Because a lot of the skill that we see in the WNBA, a lot of the athleticism that we see in the WNBA, you can see at your local high school. And that's no disrespect. I'm just talking about the differences between men and women when it comes to physical abilities. Nothing else, nothing more. So don't read anything else into that. And so when we have that discrepancy between men and women's sports, you got to compensate. You got to give people another reason to watch besides the sport itself. That's just the reality of it. And this is a perfect example. The Williams sisters. If the Williams sisters had been two sisters from Malibu, nobody would have cared. Nobody would have watched, at least not to the same level. I don't care how good they were. But the fact that they were two so-called black girls from the inner city, from Compton, and somehow made their way into a rich girls game, that was the story. That was the reason for people to watch. And then on top of that, every time they played, there was a certain energy, there was a certain friction. And I could use another word, but y'all know what time it is. Y'all know what I'm talking about. There was that. And so people wanted to watch. It was the same thing for Tiger Woods. There was a friction. It was a young so-called black man playing a predominantly rich white man's sport. Somehow, some way, this young kid found a way to dominate. And that was the line. That was the storyline. It wasn't the fact that he was a good golfer. It's how he looked. And it was a oddity to it. It was like, he's not supposed to be here. Let's see how he does. And then he proceeded to do what he did. And that was the storyline. And so it's no different with Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese and some of these other girls. There's a friction there. You can call it what you want. Everybody's got their own reality when it comes to that. But you can't deny the friction. But the friction is what sells it. And so now that Caitlin Clark has been eliminated from the playoffs, you got a lot of Caitlin Clark fans, you got a lot of Indiana Fever so-called fans saying that they're done watching the WNBA and that the WNBA messed up somehow by not letting Caitlin Clark advance to the next round because the ratings are going to go in the tank. And so what a ridiculous thing to say. That's like me saying as a basketball fan, if my favorite team doesn't make it past the second round, I'm not going to watch the NBA Finals. And so these are the kind of fans that we're dealing with. The same fans that said throughout the season that these women need to be happy, these women need to be thankful because they're flying around on private planes now because of Caitlin Clark. Their TV ratings are shooting up because of Caitlin Clark. These are the same women that were saying that. And a lot of WNBA players are seeing what time it is. And some of them are saying, to hell with your money. Because if this is what comes with it, the kind of vitriol that a lot of these women have to put up with, they don't want it. If they got to be nitpicked and crucified for every little thing that they say, every little thing that they don't say, then the hell with your money. Keep your money.
Keep your money. You just get that sucker to the designated place at the designated time.
Because truth be told, these WNBA women aren't struggling financially. They're making a whole hell of a lot more than the average WNBA fan. I know that. And Alyssa Thomas, somebody who's very soft-spoken off the court. Now, on the court, that's a different story. She has a whole nother persona. She's going to do whatever it takes to win on that court. But off the court, it's a different story. This is somebody who doesn't talk a lot. This is somebody who is very soft-spoken, like I said. But she's going to speak her mind just a little bit when it comes to these Caitlin Clark fans. I'm going to go ahead and let it play, and then, of course, I'll come back and chime in.
There's been a lot of noise across the country heading into this series and before each game, but from each tip-off to the final whistle, the Sun have been locked in, professional, and taking care of business. What does it say to the professionality of this team that you've been able to shut out the noise?
Honestly, it's been a lot of nonsense. I think in my 11-year career, I've never experienced the racial comments from the Indiana Fever fan base. We had her face on a serious matter that happened in this world, and it's unacceptable, honestly. And there's no place for it, and we've been professional throughout the whole entire thing, but I've never been called the things that I've been called on social media, and there's no place for it. And basketball is headed in a great direction, but we don't want fans that are going to degrade us and call us racial names. I mean, we already see what's happening in the world and what we have to deal with in that aspect. And we come to play basketball for our job, and it's fun, but we don't want to go to work every day and have social media blown up over things like that. It's uncalled for, and something needs to be done, whether it's them checking their fans or this league checking. There's no time for it anymore.
And so shout out to Alyssa Thomas for speaking up and speaking out. And just on a side note, I really enjoy watching Alyssa Thomas. She's a treasure and a pleasure to watch. This is somebody that plays on both ends. You're talking about a dominant player on the defensive side, and then she's somebody that's also a really good distributor of the basketball, and she can get her buckets as well. And so she's a complete player, and she's going to be dominant for a long time. And so, like I said, shout out to her for speaking up and speaking out. But Stephen A. Smith, which is somebody that I rarely agree with, and y'all know what I'm talking about. I rarely agree with Stephen A. Smith. They say even a broken clock is right twice a day. But Stephen A. Smith is actually going to drop a gem. Like I said, every once in a while he'll drop something, and he's going to drop something heavy on the girls on this one.
Following those strong comments, the WNBA released the following statement. In part, it read, "While we welcome a growing fan base, the W will not tolerate racist, derogatory, or threatening comments made about players, teams, and anyone affiliated with the league."
It's interesting because, years ago, Allen Iverson made news because he was in Indiana. And he alluded to some names that he had been called that we can't repeat over these airwaves. And people were bringing in the question, who the hell is he? And he's probably lying or whatever. But he had me. I was standing right there. I heard exactly what they said to him, word for word, okay? And they called him everything out of the sun, including the N-word. They didn't give a damn right there in Indiana. The fellas have been going through this forever. Forever. There used to be a code. You don't do that to women. You don't do that to ladies. So yes, it's great that the WNBA spoke up about it. It's great that the commissioner spoke out. It's great that Alyssa Thomas and others are speaking out. I hope it continues. Just know it ain't gonna change.
And so it's that last part. It's not gonna change. And the WNBA and their business partners don't want it to change because it sells. It's unfortunate, but like Stephen A. Smith said, it's something that the men have had to deal with for their entire careers. But up until now, the women have kind of been off limits. And that's something that has kind of hindered them in a sense, at least as far as their marketability and money-wise, because there's no struggle. People like the struggle with Caitlin Clark, even so much they compare it to Jackie Robinson.
So in many respects, the obstacle course confronting Caitlin Clark in the WNBA is more difficult than the path Jackie Robinson traveled integrating Major League Baseball in 1947. Go ahead, catch your breath.
And so it's about the struggle, or at least the perceived struggle that these players have to go to. And if there is none, you got to create one. It's called sports entertainment, and it's the reality. But anyways, I think that's going to be a wrap on this particular video. Make sure you guys go ahead and keep the conversation going on below in the comment section, and I'll try to be as active in there as I can as usual. And as usual, peace and chaos.